All right, guys, you are good to get started.
Hello and welcome to another Farm Friday. I'm here with Ned Brockmeyer from Hilltop Urban Farms again. I'm coming from my home today instead of out in the yard like last time. But we're going to talk today about seed saving, why you should save seeds, how you can save seeds, and what that means for both a farm and for an urban gardener.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the introduction, Carla. It's great to be back again for another Farm Friday. I believe we've got 2 more planned in October, so looking forward to those as well. But we are here today to talk about seeds and specifically saving seeds for your home garden and or for a farm. And there's many reasons why you would want to save your own seeds for your garden. But number one for me is preserving genetic diversity. So if we continue to keep our own seeds from our garden, we're ensuring that those seeds will last. Things will hybridize in your garden. You'll make your own varieties sometimes if it's a cross-pollinated variety. So it's a really great way to ensure that genetic diversity lasts, and we know for a fact that genetic diversity leads to a greater strength in the food system. We're less susceptible to disease and pests that way. So saving seeds is certainly important for genetic diversity. And then, of course, saving money. As a farmer, it costs quite a bit of money to buy seed for, half an acre. Even you can spend up to $800 or $1,000 on a half acre. So if we do some of our own seed saving, it cuts out a lot of cost, and it's not a lot of time that we have to put in to make sure we get a good harvest of seed for the next year. One of my favorite reasons that I like to collect seed as well is I've actually gotten quite a bit of seed recently from my grandparents. My grandmother is in a nursing home, and my great aunt is in hospice actually, and they both recently have given me both cuttings and seeds from some of their garden flowers. So it's a way for me to connect to my ancestors. It's a way to keep their memory going when they do pass. And certainly, for those who have, I have some of their garden materials as well. So it's been a really nice way for me to have them live on in my own space. And just, generally, as with all things farming and growing your own food, it makes you more self-reliant. You don't have to be relying on a seed company. You don't have to, especially this spring. I don't know if anybody recalls ordering seeds this spring, but it was crazy, even for farmers. The seed demand was so high when the pandemic hit that a lot of the seed companies were out. And generally speaking, I heard this recently, the rule of thumb for a seed company is to have 5 years worth of seed readily available. So that tells you how much seed got sold this spring. It was kind of a crazy spring in that regard. But it's, I think the pandemic has given us the opportunity to, focus on the things that are a little more slowed down in life in terms of, this does take a little bit of time, but it saves you money, and it connects you to the earth, and it helps you learn about nature in a way that I think is really valuable, especially right now.
Right. Yeah. And it's something you can get kids involved in too. Like you can do it as a family. When I start talking about how to manage your seeds once you've brought them in, that's something definitely you can do it with little kids, and it's something
Absolutely.
A family can do.
Absolutely. And when I bring kids out to the farm, and we'll talk about seeds sometimes, I'm just going to quickly turn this around because it's one of my favorite seeds. We have a couple strawberries on the farm, but very few plants in nature actually put their seeds on the outside of the fruit. And there's a really cool, if you type in vivipary, Vivipary, it's the process by which each one of those little seeds on there would begin to germinate on the fruit. And there's some really cool photos of germinating strawberries and things. But I think what's really great about saving your own seeds, and I have some lettuce seed here as well that I'll talk about in a bit, but the greatest thing for us in terms of picking the best fruit. So when you do save seeds, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, but you want to pick the ripest and best fruit that you have. So if I'm doing tomatoes like I'm going to show you today, I wanted to make sure it had no blemishes, it was disease free, just generally was the nicest looking one that I had. And the reason I do that is because if it's thriving in my climate, if it's thriving in my soil, that means that the seeds that will come from it, especially from these, self-pollinating things like tomatoes, peppers, beans, it'll be adapted to our climate and just produce the same exact fruit the following year. So we're not exactly, but close enough that it's,
Right.
going to give us a good result again.
About pulling from the plant that makes the most fruit too. Like if you have a tomato plant that's really like laden with fruit, that's probably your best bet for when you're looking for seeds to save is from that plant.
Most definitely. Yeah. One that is thriving is what you want to pick. And, the one I picked today, our tomatoes actually after the cold these past couple of days are starting to whimper out a little bit this year, but and especially the cold this weekend. If folks have houseplants outside, I'm planning on bringing in mine tonight just as an FYI. But you definitely want to pick the most thriving plant. One of the things I kind of learned about letting things go to seed on a farm. So there are certain things like corn or not corn, but carrots or cilantro that we do let go to seed on the farm, especially carrots, because carrots, they're biennials, and there are things like beets and garlic that are also biennials, which means it takes 2 seasons for them to fully grow. And so in the second season, when they finally do flower, it actually provides even more spots for pollinators. So, letting things go to seed, and I know we talked about this in a previous Farm Friday, does help the local pollinator habitat, especially late season right now when there isn't a ton of stuff for the bees and whatnot to get to. It allows them to have a chance to get some of our stuff. And that's like lettuce, radishes, and basil are really good ones for letting plants flower, and then you can harvest their seed after they've flowered. One thing I haven't talked about that really affects large farms and farmers all over the place is, the reason to save seeds is that it protects your right to share open source seeds. And this is a bit of a newer phenomenon where, these large seed companies like Monsanto develop hybridized seeds. And what happens is, if you have corn on your property and the corn next to you is that hybridized Monsanto seed, if their seed accidentally, which is likely to happen, pollinates your corn, and your corn takes on those genetic properties, Monsanto has the right to sue you if you sell it. And so there's, all sorts of reasons to be doing your own seed saving, and it ensures a safe seed supply long term, honestly, and that's why there are seed banks.
There's a really cool guy. I think he's up in New York or New Hampshire that has gone around the world and started collecting the apple varieties. And he has one tree of like every apple variety in the world. And he talks a lot about, I know he did a TED talk about like what it means to save all those varieties and how he feels about it. And it's really cool that there are, he was just some random scientist. He was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop being an academic. And I think it's cool to see that happen because I think as an individual where you're not you can do it yourself. And like that sort of thing is like, this is what I'm going to do is really
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a noble profession. I mean, there are entire farms devoted to just growing the best seed. These seed companies, the large heirloom ones especially, have 10 to 20 acre farms where they are just growing crops, not to harvest necessarily. I'm sure they harvest a little bit for themselves, but mostly just to grow the best seed that they can. And, one of the cool things that you can do in your own garden is if you have, hybrid varieties of like squash and things, or things that can be cross-pollinated like your squash, bees can travel up to a mile. So your neighbor's squash, if they have something different from you, and the bees go to both their squash and then come to your squash, it'll change the genetics and you'll get a different sort of hybridized squash. And sometimes that can lead to not so tasty results, but other times it can lead to something, you could invent something in your own backyard. It's really pretty cool, the possibilities. And then of course, you know, when you have your own seeds, you control your own food supply in a way. And in that regard, you're becoming, you know, more self-sustaining and self-sufficient.
Yeah, yeah. There's also a big movement I've seen recently too, where people are supporting native populations or local populations through having small scale farmers produce the seed instead of a large corporation. And I think that's really cool too, because it benefits a lot of people that maybe their farms are struggling because of economy or, you know, their small size or whatever. And I think that's a really cool movement that I've started seeing in seed sales, where it's a company that brings all these together and you can buy from them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there are also, like, you know, local groups that do seed swaps and things. There's all sorts of folks who love doing this every year. And so you can find that hyper local seed that somebody's been growing in their backyard for, you know, sometimes 40, 50 years, and you know it's going to do well in your yard too. So, you know, when I tell people what I like to buy, I generally choose open pollinated varieties over hybrids. And open pollinated just means that they're usually heirloom varieties. So the genetics have been passed down, and they're just, you know, the same thing that have been producing for millennia in some cases, if not centuries. But yeah, I think, you know, it's just a really important thing to do. Pardon, I know I put you down for a second.
That's fine.
But you know, there are some advantages to hybrid seeds as well. The reason people hybridize is for disease resistance. You get better uniformity in the fruit that you produce, and tend to have a higher yield and vigor. But, you know, for your open pollinated varieties, your heirloom varieties, you know, it's easier to save the seed on them, for one. It's less costly as a result. And then the flavor. I mean, most everyone says when you taste an heirloom tomato versus, you know, your hybridized Big Boy or whatever you're going to get at the supermarket, the flavor difference is huge. And, you know, I certainly have benefited from that out here on the farm this summer. And I hope the folks at the food pantry feel the same way, because it is a big difference. But that being said, I do want to show you really quickly, Carla. This morning I did pick some tomatoes. It was actually this variety. It's called a Delicious, but I didn't do this one because I didn't like all the cracks. And then actually there's some blossom end rot, so I'm not even going to eat this one. But I did, you know, I found some good ones that worked. And all you do is you're going to take just the seeds out with that gelatinous stuff in there. So you don't really want any flesh, and you just kind of spit it into a jar like this. You squeeze it out into the jar. Make sure you're putting the date and the variety on there so that you know the date and variety. And I'm just going to let these seeds sit in here for 3 days. I'll shake it once a day like this, just to make sure that mold doesn't grow. And the mold isn't a big deal if mold does grow in there. It really only discolors the tomato seeds. So you don't have to worry about it causing any disease in the seeds or anything. But once this is done, you know, you need to strain it and dry it. Now, if you are trying to sell seeds, there are some cleaning requirements that you must do in terms of bleaching the seeds and whatnot. But if you're just saving them for your house, after you've kind of washed them on a screen, or if you have a colander, you can put them in a colander and just run water over them. You set them out to dry for 5 to 6 days. And at the end of that, before you set them out to dry, you do want to clean them. And what I read recently, the best way to clean them was just getting the juice out of there, the fermented stuff that'll be there in 3 days, and then adding water to this a couple times and rinsing it. And the stuff that sinks to the bottom seed-wise are the viable seeds. Anything that's floating in there is not a viable seed. And it's at that point that you'll pull those seeds out and let them dry for 5 to 6 days. And then you're ready to store them. You know, you make sure you have your proper label of when you did it. Again, if you're looking to sell your seeds, now this isn't true for seed swaps, but if you're selling your seeds, you need to get a proper propagation rate. The state chemist has to approve that. So there are some laws for farmers to follow in that regard. But certainly if you're just saving at home or sharing with your neighbors, it's very, very simple. This really doesn't take much time. It took me 2 minutes this morning to harvest the tomatoes and then squeeze them out into here. I just didn't want to make a tomato sticky mess while I was on the phone with you,
Yeah.
honestly. So,
No, I
yeah,
understand.
that's a very simple way of doing it. And I know, Carla, you have some experience with cold stratification. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about next. Also, I have some saved vegetable seeds here as well to show you something different than a
Awesome.
tomato. So I'm going to turn you around actually and try to do this one-handed, which should be pretty amusing. So when I do work with seeds, my first thing is I get a pie pan, a cake pan, whatever, and put either white paper in it or a plain colored cloth so that I don't lose my seeds. I have a dog. She gets into everything. I really use containers for everything. But I want to talk about, this is green pepper or red pepper. These are from mine. They're dried and ready to be pulled off. So when I dry mine, when it comes to peppers, I just cut the tops off and let the seeds dry. And then I'll pick these off and put them in a paper bag to overwinter to plant in the spring. But when it comes to cold stratification, there are some plants that need to deal with cold before they will germinate properly. And depending on the plant, that time range can be different. I was actually going to talk about a plant everybody sees here in Pittsburgh. This is the seed pod from a Rosa Sharon. Almost everybody has these. And it's important to know when to pick your seed pods. So these will start to dry and be closed on the plant. I'll pick them, and then you let them dry out, they'll open up, and all the seeds will fall out. I think most of these, the seeds have already fallen out in my bag. So I'm going to dump the seeds out. And you can see how small these seeds are, which is why I use some sort of container. And then when you're getting ready to cold stratify them, you can do it in several places. You can do it in your refrigerator, or some people will prefer to do it out in a shed or a garage that isn't heated. Either method will work. I typically will put them in the fridge just because it's easier to manage insects or pests or mice that might get in a shed or something. So the next thing you're going to do is, after you get your seeds out, get a piece of toilet paper, paper towel, whatever. And this is for vegetable seeds or flower seeds that are going to grow an individual plant. If you're doing a casting seed like a wildflower, typically instead of using paper, you'll mix them in sand, like play sand, when you do this. But these are not a plant that you want to broadcast everywhere. You don't want Rosa Sharon bushes invading your yard. So you just take a few of your seeds and put them in your paper. And you can do as many as you want. You want to make sure they have enough space. And we're just going to fold this up and put it into a normal Ziploc bag, any sort of Ziploc bag. It doesn't have to be a freezer bag. You put that in your fridge. And typically, most plants, it's 8 to 12 weeks before you want to plant them. But there are some things like trees, we were talking about pawpaws, and I think there's 5 months in the freezer, in the refrigerator?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, that sounds right. It's meant to mimic the winter time, you know,
exactly,
that the seeds.
Exactly.
Yep.
There are some plants, like when you're dealing with not so much Rosa Sharons, but if I was doing milkweed, this would need to be wet, especially your swamp milkweed. So it's important to look at individual plants and what they need. Once you put these in the fridge, you want to put them in the label your bag, put them in the back of the fridge. You don't want to put them on your door where they're going to get hot and cold as you open your fridge up. So what I'll do is I just put a cardboard box in my fridge and stick all my seeds that need to be cold hardened into that cardboard box. And then that's how I go about doing that. Now, a lot of our vegetables and herbs need to be cold stratified. There's also plants that need to have the ends of the seeds scraped off with sandpaper. I don't know any vegetables that need that, but things like water lilies need them. Oh, I do have a plant actually that does need that when you work with them. I am growing prickly pears in my house.
Oh, cool.
And a lot of people don't know that you can grow cactus fruit, but if you have a big enough pot, you definitely can. And I like cactus fruit. So
nice.
This is my experiment.
Yeah,
I haven't gotten any fruit from them, but we're working on it.
Well, good luck. That's awesome. Yeah, I think the only seeds I can think of that need that, sandpaper action. The Kentucky coffee tree is actually a cool native. I'm not sure if it's native to these parts. I knew it was Ohio River Valley, so out in Indiana and Ohio, I knew it was there. But the mammoths used to eat it, and that's the only way it would break down enough to germinate. And so the ways you have to break down the seed these days literally requires caustic acids to help break down the seed coating, which mimics what happened in the mammoth's stomach and, with its stomach
Yeah.
juices and whatnot that would help break it down. And then it would, defecate. And there you go. You've got a Kentucky coffee tree.
Mhm. That's something with I think some of the water lilies and stuff is that they get dragged around in the bottom of the water, and that sort of wears them down. And if you're not doing that, you have to do it on your own.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, I really appreciate you chatting today about seed saving, and I really encourage folks at home to do it yourself. Look on social media for seed saving groups. There's always folks willing to share their knowledge and some of their seeds sometime as well. But I highly encourage folks to do it. It definitely makes us, a safer food supply, healthier people generally. So it's looking like a pretty day up here. It's warming up finally a little bit. I've had my hoodie on, so it seems you all brought the good weather.
Also, I encourage you to think about growing food plants inside over the winter. I've just started an herb garden on top of my fridge.
Awesome.
And I definitely encourage, if you're going to do seeds, to try that as well, just to give it a go if you're going to have them around
Most
anyway.
definitely. Yeah, and folks, anybody watching right now, I do have tons of extra seeds. So if people need access to seeds, we do get donations at the farm. So you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to share some of what we have. So feel free. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you again in, I think 2 weeks. And
Yeah, I think so.
I'm looking forward to the next Farm Friday. Thank you, as
Awesome.
always, Carla and Carnegie Science Center. And
Have a good
to see
day.
you as well.